cloud means or where it goes, but all right. So do you have the little button? Does it say that we're recording? Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to our first in a series of shiurim called Meaning Making in an Uncertain World. It's a series that's going to be exploring some agadot, some Talmudic narratives that deal with questions of uncertainty, that deal with having to interpret facts in front of you and there being multiple ways to interpret, dealing with doubt. And I think it's relevant to our current lives. I think it's always relevant, and I think this theme can be found in multiple stories. You'll see that the stories that I picked aren't particularly about doubt or uncertainty, although our story today will pick up on themes of like halachic pluralism, different understandings of laws of halacha and where they come from. But we'll see, you'll see that as we go. So they won't, but I think that the theme can come out in any story of Chazal, because Chazal are all about interpretation, right? And the art of interpretation, which is always making meaning out of something that isn't necessarily there, right? It should be there, it should be rooted textually, but it isn't always there. Okay, it isn't always there in one certain way. All right, so what we're going to do, and I'm going to say a little bit about the methodology I use. The way I've taught this year before has been in the longer format, so we'll see where we go. But what I usually do, what we're going to uncover in this sugya is about learning and studying, right? Something you guys are probably familiar with in some form or another, but learning Torah and how learning Torah is about being a good listener, okay? That's one of the big takeaways we're going to find throughout this sugya. Through this story, our goal is going to be thinking about what we do when we engage with Torah. So like, what's its purpose? How do we influence the Torah when we study it? And in turn, how does the Torah that we study influence us? Shout out to the Straw Hat podcast, in which I touched on this theme with Rabbi Walkenfeld again, because that's a theme that comes up a lot. How do we listen to Torah such that when we're learning, such that we influence the Torah and the Torah influences us, right? That kind of mutual relationship. Okay, so more broadly, this is a story about learning in general. What is the teacher's role? What's the role of the student? Guys, I'm not going to be picky about like keep your camera on but I really do want this to be participatory. I'm imagining you in the room with me because I need that kind of dynamic energy, okay? So like you can stay unmuted unless there's like a noise in the background, or you can, and I'd like for you to, okay, got it. Thank you, Benny. That's all. Benny will be back. But yeah, please keep in mind this is interactive. Okay. So so we're going to be talking about the learning process, right? What's the teacher's role? What's the student's role? How do they all interact with each other? Students with each other, teacher, student. And so there might be a little bit of a lesson in pedagogy as we go along, or maybe what not to do. And we'll see that as we go. So let's get a little bit of a show of hands, but now you guys can just speak because there are 5 of us. Okay, so do you consider yourselves visual learners, auditory learners? What's your best mode of learning? And then you just shout it. It's not a discussion. You can just shout it. Like how do you learn best?
School of Hard Knocks, experience.
Experience. Okay. So we're a little beyond school. Not too rigid in my thinking. Yeah. Anyone else? What's your best mode of learning? Okay, so experience. Trying and failing.
Learn by doing.
Reading.
You like reading, Benny? What do you say, Jen?
Learn by doing.
Learn by doing. Okay, so we've got a machloket. We've got a machloket here of experience. Okay, like learn by doing, learn through experience versus okay, I read books. All right, I'm not going to judge, but all right. So think of a positive experience that stayed with you. So I'm thinking about more in this model. What we're going to see, teacher student, right? Think of a positive experience that stayed with you. So this could be in a learning context or in another context. You know, what is strongest about that memory? Does everyone have like a positive experience? I say the word positive, can bring anything, right? You have that image, okay? What's the thing that's staying with you, the strongest part of the memory, right? Like what's something that jumps out at you? Is it the sight? Is it the sound? Is it a certain smell, right? Is there one element of that memory that kind of affects you more than the other? Okay. Anyone have like a thought? This is Torah too. This is Torah too.
Yeah, it just depends upon the experience. I think that there are times where the performance or the stage or the visual is remembered, but you forget what the content was.
Uh-huh.
There are times when you read something and the content is retained better, and other times where the person on live and in person makes that impression, you remember that. So I don't have a.
I can tell that you're not thinking of a specific experience. That's what I can tell. You didn't follow instructions.
I'm thinking of a very particular professor, as a matter of fact.
Okay, yeah, great.
I have no idea what he taught me, but I remember everything he was about on stage.
Okay, so you remembered his theatrics. You remembered his, I don't know, presence. Okay, interesting. There's something about his personality and the way that he gave over information. Forget the information. What was special about the way he gave over the information that impacted you?
It was so dramatic. It was so passionate that you were supposed to buy into it. Yeah.
Okay, right. You kind of wanted to buy what he was selling because he loved it so much. Okay, cool. Anyone else want to share something? All right. Right. In the classroom, I'd wait a little longer, but over Zoom. Okay, so we're thinking about what's more effective than the other, seeing or hearing when it comes to this learning experience, right? Sometimes, right, and I'm thinking more rigidly in the classroom setting, right? Are you an auditory or visual learner? We're going to see those themes come out in this sugya. And the sugya, I think, will come out on one side or the other, what makes for a powerful learning experience. Okay, so you may not have thought about learning in this way before, but there's a sensory description of learning, right? The Torah's idea of learning Torah, the experience of Talmud Torah Berabim in a group, is highly sensory. Okay, so there's a description of hakel. Does anyone know what hakel is? Hakel? What's hakel? Yeah, Benny.
Not the year, the 70 every like the year after the Shemitah year, everyone comes to Jerusalem and the king reads Devarim.
Okay, and the king reads Devarim. All right, so if you take a look down now, you see you guys can see my screen. All right, I'm going to read to us the psukim about hakel, this tradition of hakel. The root of hakel you can already hear. Hakel is kahal, right? Congregation. Right, so it's what Benny is talking about. Every 7th year, right? Here's the mitzvah of hakel in the Torah in Devarim 31. Moses instructs them as follows: every 7th year, the year set for the Shemitah at the Chag HaSukkot, when all of Israel comes to the Lord in the place that Hashem will choose, okay, the Beit Midrash, you'll read this teaching aloud in the presence of all of Israel. So one massive event of Talmud Torah. Every 7th year. So it says hakel et ha'am ha'anashim va'anashim v'hataf. That's where the word hakel comes from. If you've ever, right, they still do a tribute to hakel in Israel. If you're there during the year after Shemitah, they'll do this great gathering at the Kotel. It's overwhelming. It is all of these evocative things that play on your senses, kind of what's described here. Everyone must be present, men, women, and children, all the strangers in your community, that they may hear and so learn to revere the Lord your God. Leman, it says, Leman yilmedu v'yaru et Hashem Elokeichem v'shamru la'asod et kol divrei Torah hazot. Okay, so that's the purpose of hakel. Everyone should be gathered together to see, and right, we're saying to hear and to learn, and then to fear God, and then keep God's commandments. Okay. And their children too, who have not had the experience, shall hear and learn to revere the Lord your God, right? It should be passed on, right? It's an experience that is multisensory. It's everyone together, and and through that experience, you learn to fear God. Through the learning of Torah, you learn to fear God as long as you live in the land that you shall possess. So that's the mitzvah of Hakel. It's this huge event of Talmud Torah. Everyone's supposed to be there. And it's kind of this second giving of the Torah, right? That we kind of reenact a sort of Har Sinai moment where we have the leaders up on at the head, and they're reciting the Torah for us, and we're all listening and taking it in as a nation. So that's the Hakel. So all right. So the gathering at Hakel, we come together as a community of studiers, of people who learn Torah, and we're asked to actively engage in the tradition, whether it is, right, and everyone who's mentioned here, right, this is an example of kind of different modes of learning, right? The Anashim, the Nashim, the Taf, and the Ger, right? Men, women, children, and people who have joined the nation, Gerim, are all going to learn in different ways, and different things from the teaching are going to hit them in different ways and impact them in different ways, resonate in different ways. But they're each asked to be there because each of them brings their own contribution, right? Kind of the act of Talmud Torah is kind of lacking without all of their presence together, creating that Torah together. So what we're going to do now, that's Hakel. So our Gemara is going to jump off from this point. We're going to have a Gemara that talks about students coming to meet their rabbi. They're going to come and meet their rabbi for a study session, and they're going to be presenting some drashot, some interpretations of verses relating to the Hakel. And I want us to now go to learn that. How do we do, maybe we don't do Chavruta. No, wow, no, we got no's, we got wow. All right, we won't do Chavruta. Now is when I would send you guys to Chavruta, but I won't. Okay, so we're gonna understand what happens in the story. The way I want to approach this is a sort of literary structure. We're gonna look at who are the characters, first of all, what are the events, what scenes happen, how do they break down, what words are used to describe different scenes, what are then motifs that emerge from them, right? Recurring themes and motifs that happen. How does each part of the story relate to each other? And then we'll come out with our messages. The point is, right, we're going to look at a text of Gemara, but all of you, no matter your level of text skill, will have something to say about it as intelligent readers, right? That's the idea, is that the Gemara and its stories, and that's what we're learning, right? Agadah, presents itself in a way that I know that, like, the first part of this text, right, it looks like, okay, this is like a bunch of Hebrew and Aramaic, and I don't know what this is, right? But if we break it down and we have the English here, and it could ostensibly be the same, but I want us to be connected to the Hebrew so we see the literary techniques going on, is that you'll see the themes that the editors of this story meant to bring out, and hopefully we'll find a few different lessons coming out here, each according to your understanding or what you see as most pertinent from this story. All right, yeah, we're gonna read together. The thing that I did is that I rearranged this text so that the English and the Hebrew were separate. Usually I do it side by side. How about I keep it, should I keep the English on the screen and I can read from the Hebrew? Does that make sense? Okay. And you have a link, you can open it to yourself for yourself. Yeah, does anyone have a different preference of how to make that more accessible?
That's fine with me.
That is fine with you, beautiful. Okay. So our sugya breaks down, you'll see I broke it into sections. There's story number 1 that includes 4 different drashot. A drasha is when there is a pasuk quoted, like a verse from the Bible, and then we're given an interpretation that can be a halachic interpretation, narrative interpretation. So that's what the first section is. Then there's commentary on that story, and it goes like, wait, what the heck was going on, right? Okay. And it brings an ancillary, like a related story that explains what was going on. So that's what we're going to see here. Yeah. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. We start with a Braita, and all of this can be traced back. Most of this can be traced back to the Tosefta, which is a Talmudic work from between the years 0 to 200. It's a collection of with some editing that happened in the Bavli a lot later to make it like kind of with it's interpretive editing, right? To add depth to the story in the way that the Bavli, the later rabbis, understood it. So we're gonna read it together. The rabbis taught Maaseh, there's a story that's happening. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Rabbi Elazar ben Chisma, Shalchu lahakbil pnei Rabbi Yoshua b'Pki'in. Okay, so we have this list of Tanaim, these rabbis, from about the year 100. Okay, they're the first generation of Tanaim, and they are first, second generation. They are going to be lahakbil, to accept or to greet their rabbi. I have been signed out. Why does it say that? Wait, you guys can still hear me and see me?
Yeah.
There's a prompt on my screen that seems.
Someone else logged into the Zoom account.
That's not good.
No, your sound was,
But I'm good now.
When you move to the side, you go off mic. So it might have been saying that you're.
Yeah, you got a little distant sounding for a sec, but you didn't get logged out.
Okay. All right. I'm back now. Okay. Story time is back. Okay. So they go to greet their rabbi in Ki'in. It's a town in northern Israel. I was Googling it a little bit, but it's still, there is another modern day city that's called Ki'in. I don't know historically if they're the same in the same place. Okay, all of these people are Talmudim, are students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who's in the first generation name, so they're the second generation. Amar lahem. So the teacher opens up and says to his students, they come to greet him. Why would students come to greet their teacher? Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a while.
They haven't seen him in a while. They miss him, yeah. Anything else? What are they doing? This is common sense. I'm not trying to be, I know it's like, oh, I don't know, I don't study Talmud. Use your common sense. I promise. It's not scary.
Showing pressure, an opportunity to learn from them again.
Showing respect. I want to learn from them, yeah. Okay. Rashi says this was Chag time, right? We're going to see what they were reading from, right? So if it's about the time of Hakel, and they're reading from Hakel, so it's around the end of Sukkot, okay? And they are, they're going to greet their rabbi because you're supposed to greet your teacher on the holiday, okay? To go and learn. Amar lahem. Well, also, what do you think they're going to go do? They're going to go. You said like they want to go and learn Torah, okay? So now we're going to see something surprising that happens. Amar lahem. He says to them, so who speaks up first?
Rabbi Yoshua.
Rabbi Yoshua, the rabbi, speaks up first. He goes like, it's like, okay, and you'll tell me if this reminds you of anything in your day-to-day life. And he goes to them, what was the new thing, the chiddush, or the novelty that you learned in the Beit Midrash today? Okay, if you're imagining, right, your kid comes home from school, or I don't know, any child comes home, because and you're making conversation with a child after school. Oh, what'd you learn in school today? Right? Like, there's an assumption here as well, right? So he's kind of like, okay, so we got father figure and children, or a teacher and student. He's opening up the conversation for them, wants to create a dialogue. There's an assumption here that anytime you go to the Beit Midrash, there's a chidush. Anytime you learn Torah, there's something new that emerges. Okay, and that's, I think, like an essential statement of this entire sugya and of the entire endeavor of learning Torah. Whenever you sit to learn Torah, there's going to be something new happening. Why? Because it's never been learned by you in this moment, at this time, with the same, I think that's a very, very strong, real thing, right? There's this Torah is going, why did you all mute? Guys, you're making me feel lonely. Okay, so what happened today? They said, right? We're your students and we drink from your waters. In other words,
why tell us this question?
Don't ask me this question. Wait, what'd you say, Jonathan?
You tell us.
You tell us. Like, we can't. Who are we to teach in front of you? This is like a weird dynamic, Rebbe. Like I'm intimidated, right? I don't want to say anything because you have Torah. I don't have Torah. I'm a student. Okay, right? And I'm already pushing back and saying like every single one of us has Torah, no matter when we sit, we learn. You have a chiddush to say, right? So that's what we're gonna see. Amar lahem, afal pichen. Yeah, okay, even so, right? So he's greeting them where they are, and he gets like, okay, they're afraid, right? even so, share something with me. Beit Midrash below chidush. Okay, it's impossible that you sat and learned Torah and don't have a chiddush, which means I'm not the only one that holds Torah, right? I know that I'm your teacher, but you hold Torah. Okay. Okay, so what does he do to draw out the Torah from them? What would you do if your kid or there's a little kid that you're talking to, a relative, like a friend's kid, and you say, and they don't want to talk, like nothing happened today. So what do you say next? Like nothing happened. What'd you learn in school today? Nothing. What do you say next?
You must have learned something.
You must have learned something. Okay.
There's no such thing as nothing.
There's no such thing as nothing. Jen, you're a parent. Let's what do you say?
Play two truths and a lie to make her tell me about her day. So
You say 2 truths and a lie. What do you mean?
what
How would you do that to get Eliana to tell you?
so tell me 2 truths and a lie about your day, and it can't be about the
Okay, like kind of like a more pointed question, right? Like,
yes.
okay, I know this detail about your life. How about this person, right? That's what I do with my niece, right? Like, how about your friend Leah? Like, did you see her today, right? How was, right? Because that gets, oh yeah, of course I saw Leah. Like, and I had like so you know something about them, so you bring it out, right? So that's what he does next. He says, well, Shabbat Shel Mi Haita. Okay, who's the teacher, right? Who was teaching today in school? What class did you go to? And they answer, Shabbat Shel Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Haita. It was the Shabbos of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. This is a reference to the Benny knows the stories, the deposition story of Rabban Gamliel, which I put in a footnote at the bottom, which is another story about dynamics between teachers and students and who is really a worthy leader and teacher. Only someone who can treat their students with respect and with kindness. And that's kind of being referenced here. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, after Rabban Gamliel is deposed because of the way he treats people in the Beit Midrash, they bring him back, they reinstate him, but they don't reinstate him fully. He gets 3 Shabbos on that he gets to teach, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah gets 1. Okay, so they like do this rotation. So they're like putting this in reference to the other story in the context of the other Tanaim. So it was Rabbi Elazar was the teacher that Shabbos. Okay, so then he follows up. Okay, so what was he teaching about today, right? Kind of drawing them out. Pedagogy. Amrulo v'parshat Hakel. He was teaching about the section of Hakel, this description of this massive gathering of Talmud Torah that happens after Shemitah, at the end of Shemitah every year. Umadar Ashba, right? So you see like the small pointed questions of a teacher who knows his students. So what did he teach about Hakel? So here's our first drasha in our series of drashot, our first interpretation of these psukim. Okay, so what did he teach? Hakel ta'am anashim anashim va'ataf, right? Our pasuk that says, gather Hakel, all the people, men, women, children, etc. Is maybe a famous drasha that you're familiar with. Okay, if men come to learn at Hakel, because they're the more literate set in this historical context, nashim ba'ot lishma, women come to lishma,
Listen.
to listen. Okay, taf lama ba'in, why do the children come? You familiar with this? Why do the children come to Hakel? Right? What are the children gaining if they don't understand what's being read from the Torah, right? They're not literate, they're not understanding this section from Dvarim that's being read. They come to give sachar, to give reward for their parents who took the time and put in the effort to bring them to this massive gathering of Talmud Torah, who teach them the culture of Torah and community, right? That's what they're brought for. If we have that moment there also, what theme is being brought out, right? That we've already seen in this one drasha. What's being brought out? Men learn one way, women might learn another, or people might learn another, right? There's different levels of learning it. I'm not saying as a gender essentialist statement, it's saying like here they're noting different ways of learning, right? Mm-hmm. The more literate, they're learning on one level. The women are learning lishmoa, and we're going to see this come up again. Shmi'ah versus riyad, the listening, the auditory learners, and the and the visual learners, we'll see, and even the children, right? They come and they're absorbing something too, right? And there's something about the continuity of Torah here that's important, that's being emphasized.
They're gonna like remember the experience. They're not gonna remember what it was about, but they're not gonna remember what it was about, but they remember the experience of going like every year, every other, whatever it is.
Exactly, right? And maybe they'll grow up and say, okay, my parents brought me to Hakel. They brought me to learn Torah in community. I'm going to bring my kids too, right? There's continuity here, right? And Torah can't exist, right? The Torah can't be stagnant. It can't be one person learns it and that's it. It obviously has to continue. It needs to be expanding. And we're going to see that theme come up as we read. Listen for that theme, okay? Amar lahem. Okay, so he answers them and he says like, Margalit Tavai Tabi Edchem Ubikashna Logdami Mani, like you had such a beautiful teaching, a pearl of wisdom, and you were going to like withhold it from me? How dare you, right? He's like kind of like saying like, wow, that was so smart what you said, right? Okay, more encouragement for the student. What an amazing thing, right? I say that to my students all the time. That was beautiful, you know? Doesn't matter. Now let's see, like, is that like a really, really smart thing to say, right? Oh, like men come to learn, women come to listen, children come to give sachar. Is that like a really sharp thing that like needed to be said and like give the, okay, that was a leading question, right? But like not a super sharp thing, but again, we see the encouragement here that's coming, like you like anything you have to share is so valuable, right? The proliferation of Torah, the abundant, right? Just keep spreading as much Torah as you can, right? So, all right, the Odarash. And further, so now we have more drashot that were given on that day. So we're going to have the, right, Torah begets Torah. Once you start sharing, here's more. O darash, et Hashem ha'amarta hayom, v'Hashem ha'mercha hayom. At God you chose, and God chose you, right? This is from, or lifted you up, unified you as a nation, right? This is God choosing us to be a nation for God. Amar lama kadosh baruch hu. So we have that pasuk. This pasuk is adjacent to the reading. If we went through the different parshiot of what's actually read at that Hakel moment, there's a list in the Mishnah in Sota of what are the parshiot. This is adjacent to those parshiot. Okay, so it's whatever, more depth there, but we'll move from that. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. So we have our interpretation. Say, if you make me one in the world, so I will make you one kind of chativa unit in the world, right? There's this kind of mutuality, this relationship. If you call me one, right? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, I'll make you one, right? I'll unify the nation. I'll make you guys a powerful force, a family. Okay, that's the two choosings, right? God lifts us, we lift God up, God lifts us up. Okay. Second drasha. Here we have an explanation of that drasha. How do I know that you make me into one unit in the world? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And I'll make you one in the world, like it says, it's right? Who is like your nation? Israel, one nation. Okay, the mutuality we do to God and God mirrors back to us. Okay. The Apu Batach V'Darash, right? Now the Torah is just flowing, right? There's more. Okay. Divrei Chachamim Kedarbanot Ukmasmerot Netuim Ba'alei Asupot Nitnu Mero'et Echad. Okay, so we have this pasuk that is a little more complicated, a pasuk from Kohelet. Okay, we've now gone away from the drashot that happened in Hakel, Kohelet, Hakel. I don't know if there's a wordplay there. Probably. Okay, the words of the Chachamim are like are as goads and the nails well planted are the words of the masters of assemblies, all of which are given for one shepherd. This is a metaphor or a metaphor for Torah, right? The words of the wise are as goads and as nails well planted. What's a goad?
A thing you poke a cattle with to make it.
Oh, a thing you poke cattle with. So you've poked cattle before.
Many times.
Many times. Okay, so you've learned this sugya before.
Well,
you just know what a goad is.
Also, yes.
Also, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so a goad is something that guides the sheep to go in one direction, right? Or guides a cow, right? If they're plowing, right? A goad will make them go in one line. Okay, son. Kimasmirot nituim, so they are like nails planted in the ground. Kulam nitnu me'orecha. They were all given from one ro'eh. Ro'eh is a shepherd. Okay, they've all been given from one ro'eh. I would like to. Okay. What do we have in this metaphor? Let's read the. Okay, let's read the continuation of this as it expounds upon it. Lamanim shalu divrei Torah. What are the divrei Torah compared to? Durban. Okay, it is darbon. Okay, darbonot. They are compared to these goats. Lomar l'cha, to tell me. Just as a Durban guides a cow to bring life into the world, how does a goad make a cow bring life into the world? Make some sense out of that sentence? What the heck is happening here? It makes sense, I promise. We don't know.
Because the goad makes sure they plow the right part of the field, plant the right.
Right. Okay. A goad will make sure the cow goes to the right part of the field and it brings forth life. Divrei Torah, so too, Divrei Torah mechavmin et lomdehem midarkei mital ledarkei chaim. So too, Divrei Torah guide the learner from ways of death to ways of life. Okay, so we're thinking about this again, this productivity of Torah. We're talking about, right? There's always a chidush in the Beit Midrash. There is always productivity that happens out of learning Torah, right? Just as the cow brings forth, right, will plow the land and bring forth fruit, right? That's what good Torah will do. If Torah is not causing growth, if Torah is not causing further drashot or further understanding, it's not good Torah learning, and it's not Torah learning. Okay. Okay. Maybe you would think, okay, let's expand the metaphor. This Durban, this goad, right, can be like uprooted, it can be moved, it can be changed around, right? It's like, flimsy enough to be thrown around. So too, Divrei Torah can be metaltalin. Can they be challenged? Can they be changed? Can they be removed like this goad? No. Talmud Omar Masmerot, we're continuing in the pasuk and connecting the pieces of that pasuk that kind of doesn't make any sense together, right? If they're like goads, that means they guide us in the right direction and create life. But can they be thrown away? No, they're also Masmerot. They're nails, they're stuck into the ground once you have them, once you have that chidush, okay? But then again, what's the challenge for Torah being a masmer? If Torah is kind of stuck like a pin in the ground, what's the problem?
And it doesn't seem to be flexible.
Not so flexible. Okay, not so flexible. And we're going to see another problem the Gemara brings up. What happens to nails, to metal? It rusts over time, right? It's not enduring. It doesn't create. Maybe they also get degraded over time. They rust and they don't create more. Talmud Lomar Nituim. No, look at the second part of the last part of that pasuk. They are natua. They're planted. It's not that they're only stuck in the ground. They're like a nitiah, a planting, so they grow. Ma nitiazo parei v'ravei. Af divrei Torah parin v'ravin. Just like something that's planted grows, so too divrei Torah grow. Okay, pru urvu, pray urve. What's the sense of pru urvu? Not a trick question. Pru urvu. Umil'u ta'aretz v'kiv shua, says God. In a parsha we most recently read. Not this, but we recently read it.
Be fruitful and multiply.
Ma?
Be fruitful and multiply.
Thank you. Be fruitful and multiply. Okay, that's the commandment to raise children. Okay, pru urvu. And here it's saying divrei Torah are parin v'ravin. Okay, picking up on this theme again of Torah must always be multiplying. Teacher, student, pasuk, drasha, chidushim, different things growing out of the Torah study. It's like having, right, raising students here is like having children, right? Creating Torah chidushim is like having children in the world. Right, that's the level at which they're saying this is like Torah study has to be as fruitful as you would have pru urvu, right? The creation of children in the world. But last support, okay, and that's what the chidush is, right? The chidush is the child of Torah, right? When we get together with Torah, there's a chidush produced, right? And there's that's what pruruvu is. Okay, Baalei Sukkot, last part of this pasuk. Okay, so what are the masters of the assembly? We've already said the other three parts, what they have to do with Torah. Right, we're guided in one place, but it's kind of stuck in the ground, and yet it grows, right, and it multiplies. Why are they called gatherings? Because they gather together in groups and they create Torah. They involve themselves in Torah. Okay, halalu mitamin v'halalu mitaharin. One group might say this is tameh, right, as they're learning. The other group might say this is tahor. One says pure, one says impure, right? They have arguments. They quarrel amongst themselves. They argue. Halalu osrin v'halalu matirin. Some say this is not okay. This is prohibited. The others say no, it is. It's permitted. Halalu poslim v'halalu machshirin. One group will say these baalei asupot. These groups they'll say this is not good. This is no good. This is pasul. The other one will say no, it's kasher. It's good. Okay, they can say completely opposite things from each other. That's what happens in Talmud Torah. That's what happens in Machloket. What's the reaction of a learner in that group if you show up to that shiur, right? If we're talking about pedagogically and all of these, if this is the experience of learning Torah, you're sitting in this shiur and you see the two Rebbeim, and the Rebbeim are saying, or Rabbaniot, right? They're saying Tameh, Tahor, Mutar, Asur, Kasher, Pasul, about the same thing, opposites. What's your reaction as a learner?
Confusion.
Confusion.
We're saying opposite things.
Yeah, opposite things. What, right? So this is one of my favorite lines in like all of Torah. It says in all of, let's say, Torah Sheba'al Peh. Okay.
You scroll down on the source sheet.
Shema Yomar, thank you. Well, we haven't actually passed this yet. Okay, so this is the drasha number 4, right? Should a person say, Shema Yomar, hey, ach ani lamed Torah me'ata. How am I supposed to learn Torah? Like, what is this Torah thing? Right? You're telling me it has to do with this productivity and it multiplies. And you're trying to tell me that, right? If the first part of the sugya was saying, I speak to the experience of the student, right? I understand how to explain things in different ways. Certainly the worst way to, an easy way to lose your student is to say, all of these things are true all at once. And how do you live Torah? Tameh tahor at the same time, right? Like, do opposite things in the same moment. What's a student supposed to do? How am I supposed to learn Torah from then on? So the resolution here is back to that theme of unity that we heard before, right? Of saying like God makes us one on the earth and we make God one in the heavens, and vice versa. So what we're supposed to do, right? But then we have all of this crazy productivity in the meantime, right? There's this kind of movement throughout this sugya that's saying it's all one and infinitely growing at the same time, right? It's asking us to hold this tension. It says in the next line, Talmud Omar, the pasuk says, Kulam nitnu me'or echad. They were all given from one shepherd. Who's a shepherd?
Capital S shepherd.
The who?
Capital S shepherd.
Maybe capital S shepherd, meaning God. Yeah. Other reads?
That's what I thought.
That's what I
Okay,
thought.
God, capital S shepherd. Who else was the shepherd?
The rabbi.
Moshe.
The rabbis, Moshe. Yeah, they're right there. These are the people who kind of taught us the interpretations of all these psukim. They're the ones who created or gave us this tradition of learning Torah. And we're thinking back to this whole context, which is Hakel, right? That giving of the Torah moment that was mediated through Moshe Rabbeinu. And then mediated again through all of these rabbis giving over their teachings in groups. Mediated again, right? Through their drashot. And as it continues to be mediated through whatever teacher-student relationship happens and through our own interpretation, right? But this sugya is telling us, no, you have to hold the tension of all of this proliferation of Torah and even contradictory Torah, because you can hold it in the fact that it was all given from one ro'eh, right? Either God or Moshe, maybe Moshe representing God, right? I don't know. We could that line could hold a lot theologically, depending on which read you go, capital S shepherd or Moshe shepherd. Okay, but in the next line we see that it goes, I think it goes more with, well, actually you can go either way, but you can do your own read and find your own textual supports here. El Echad Netanan, says the Gemara. One God gave them. Parnas Achad Amaran. One Parnas, like leader, gave them over or said them. Mipi Adon Kol Masim, from the mouth of the creator of all, or the one that creates Adon Kol Masim. Okay, God. Baruch Hu. Dichtiv Vaydaber Elokim et Kol Devrei Ma'ela. Right, or pasuk. The God said all these things. Right, you might get existential confusion after learning all of this, and even right the moment you step into the world of Talmud Torah, there's confusion. There's machloket. It's like one of the fundamental things. So that the sugya is saying, like, take a step back, don't worry, right? Kind of giving us that pat on the back that they're all given from one God. So we've got our listening theme back, right? You saw the revelation, you've learned all the Torah, but says the Gemara, make your ear like a hopper, a grain hopper. Yeah, because we're all farmers here, right? Something that holds grain, right? Make for yourself a heart that knows how to listen well. To the words of those who say tameh and those who say tzahor, to those who say prohibited and those who say permitted, to those who say no good and those who say kosher. Right, so that's what you have to learn to do, says the sugya. Listen to Torah. So there's a deeper level here, and if we go back to that idea of hakel, the men learned, the women listened. There's a deeper understanding of listening here. Anyone want to take a stab at what listening means after we've read that line, right? Make your ear like a hopper and create a heart that knows how to listen. So what if that's the reaction to the existential confusion that was introduced in the Gemara before? What does listening here really mean?
It's not just absorbing the sound, it's like trying to understand what they're saying, or like what they're really talking about. Like, why are they arguing over this thing?
Yeah.
They're arguing over
maybe understanding a deeper level or seeing a broader context for sure. Right? Like absorbing. I like that word, right? Absorbing and kind of feeling out an instinct. I think shmi'ah feels like it's going and saying here from the heart, right? Something of, and the heart, right, doesn't also, right, it's hard to know, right, because heart here doesn't really mean the way we understand like heart feeling, right? It's like heart mind, but like we're not going to go through all the philosophical understanding of heart, but lishma here, right, hearing is strong. Hearing here is a stronger understanding, it would seem, right? It's saying we have no way to see, so we're gonna I know it's 9:04. Can you give me another 5 minutes and we'll learn, we'll just read through the last piece, see some of the resonances of listening and seeing, and you'll see, maybe we'll try and come out with, or you can sit with that understanding of what it means to really learn Torah through this. So yeah, there's so much more to say. Okay. When my Rebbe taught this, right, he would say that like the seeing is like kind of seeing the facts on the Torah shebichtav, the written Torah. We know what it says, we read it, right? Those are kind of facts. And Torah sheba'al peh, that evolving understanding of Torah and adaptation of Torah to the world, that proliferation of chidushim based on new people, new experiences, new realities, right? That's kind of the listening, right? Being attentive, being sensitive to how Torah is growing and needs to grow and where it can grow in an authentic way. So those are kind of two levels that we could possibly see that as. There's so much here. So I'm going to continue reading through what I gave you. I'm going to.
Is this the Rabbi Yoshua who is like the one that Rabban Gamliel antagonized?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But don't quote me. We can look it up. It doesn't say who he is, but it says that he lives in Pekin, so that's how you'll be able to trace it. So if you want to Google that and find out. All of these are, I mean, they're all the same time period, right? These are actually rabbis that could have spoken to each other. So that's what's fun about this also. Is this is a story that really could have happened. There aren't, right, when you're tracing Talmudic stories, there aren't always, right, the concern for historically accurate retelling is not number one, and that's why we're kind of looking to the literary elements, right? There will be kernels of historical truth, but not necessarily. So I don't know if you want to look for it. That's all right. So they say, Lashon Hazeh, Amar Lahem, sort of Yeshua responds to all of these teachings, right? Suddenly, like this wellspring of Torah, right, came forth from them after they were like, I don't know what I learned today in school, and then they're like spreading all of this amazing Torah. First, they start with this really weak chidush that really doesn't take much, and then they're kind of shedding like Torah on, like sharing Torah an existential, right, the existential experience of learning and like what it means to have pluralism in halacha, right, like big things that they've gone through. Okay, so here's his response. Ein dor yatom sheRabbi Elazar ben Azariah sharui b'tocho. The generation that has this teacher, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, they're not going to be yatomim, right? They're not orphaned. They've got it. This is the language of my teacher, right? So he goes like, right, they've got a real tati looking out for them, like a real like protector, someone who's guiding them to like actually produce, create, and learn authentic Torah. And again, going back to the theme of, right, pru'urvu, right, ein dor yatom, right? They're not orphans, right? There's continuity of Torah. He's encouraging real, authentic continuity of Torah and continuation of the Torah tradition, even as they're producing chidushim that might not be what they're doing. That's again the anashim nashim vataf, right? The people that come to Hakel, ein dor yatom. Okay, and all the pru'urvu stuff that we saw in the metaphors. Okay, so says the Gemara commenting on this story, right? This is all the Tosefta. This was from this Talmudic material earlier, right? And around the year 100 or so, right? That's what these rabbis lived. So the Talmud in the year 500 or so is explaining this story, looking at it as this pedagogical tale. Okay, or Behedya, right? So why didn't they just respond right away when he asked them, what did you learn? Because clearly they had a lot to share, right? Mishum Masa Shahaya. So that's what the Gemara is wondering what happened. And because there was a Masa, something happened. Okay, dun dun dun, right? Something ominous happened that like cast this pall over their experience, and they were afraid. Okay, so right, there's also talking about a classroom or any teacher student or any peer-to-peer experience. If there's fear involved in the learning, if there's intimidation, right, it's going to stunt the Torah. It's going to stunt the learning. It's going to cause the experience to be different. Right, it's not that charismatic and exciting teacher that you had. Right, instead it's a scary person. Maaseh. So what's the Maaseh? Rabbi Yossi ben Darmuskit. So this is a Tana from the same generation. So we're going back to the Tanaim. We had a short intermission from the Talmud, and whatever it is, they comment and then they go back to the Tanaic material. Shalach lahakbil pnei Rabbi Elazar v'lod. Okay, this is the same similar area of Ki'in and Yavne. So it's the same idea, right? They went to go greet he went to go greet his rabbi. Amar lo, ma chidush hayom b'Beit Midrash hayom. Okay, similar, right? Everyone's saying you sat in the Beit Midrash. There's a chidush. There's also something just to walk away from this. There's always news in the Beit Midrash. Amar le, nimnu v'gamru. So he says to his teacher, like right away, nimnu v'gamru. They voted. Amun u'moab ma'asrin ma'aser ani b'shvit. These nations, or people who live in these areas on the east of the Jordan, which aren't technically part of Israel, they should give Maaser Ani b'Shvid. Maaser Ani is a tithe that's given in years 3 and 6 of the Shemitah cycle, the 7-year Shemitah cycle, and they're tithes that are given to the poor. But in the Shemitah year, we don't have this, and so it's possible that the poor would have it less in the Shemitah year, given absent these gifts. So to add to these gifts, they say, okay, those areas that aren't really part of Israel on the east of the Jordan, they should, during the year of Shemitah, take these gifts, give the tithes to the poor. Okay, Amunu Moab, Masrin, Maser Ani B'Shvi. The problem is that he presented it, so now, this is a good humanitarian law, right? It's nice and it's saying, do social justice, feed the poor, right? Good law, we should all be behind it. But the teacher says to them, but it says Nimnu V'Gamru, which is a language of voting. Like, we decided, right, if we're talking about how laws happen and how transmission happens, how Torah develops, this is the chiddush that we had, you need to take care of the poor, right? Give food to them. Don't withhold food from them in the Shemitah year. Amar lo, Yossi. He's not happy with him. He says to the student, Yossi, shod yadecha v'kabel einecha. Hold out your hands and receive your eyeballs. What?
What was that? Isn't there some like kid show from like the 90s with a thing that holds its eyes?
Yeah, it's not like SMH. It's like hold your eyes should fall out of your head for saying something so ridiculous, right? What? Okay, like if we take this, obviously it's a very he has a problem with what his student is saying. His problem seems to be that that he, again, his student is saying like Nimnu v'gamer, we had this Kiddush, and he's like, no, you don't understand. This is a tradition that was passed down from way before. It's intuitive to Torah because Torah will always take care of the poor. If you really understand what Torah is doing, it's taking care of the vulnerable. If you come along and say Nimnu v'gamer, you're not in touch with tradition. Okay, so like that's what he's kind of mad at. And he says, your eyes should fall out, right? You're looking instead of listening, right? You're trying to make a drasha. You're like, oh, I see the text here. No. This is part of our tradition going way back. You got to listen closer. You have to be more sensitive to what Torah actually is. Okay, or the Torah that takes care of the vulnerable. Okay, Bacha Rabbi Elazar va'amar. So Rabbi Elazar cries, right, in response to what his student says, right? He cries, he can no longer see, again, playing with sight, saying like literally obstructing his sight. Sod Hashem li'reav ubrito lahodi'am. The secret is of God is given to God's, the ones who fear him, and brito lahodi'am, and his covenant to tell them. That's in right, that's God acting as the parnas, right? God acting as the one who's teaching, as opposed to Moshe. So if we're going to settle that debate, we can look through the sugya for different hints to that debate. Right, so it's something you hear. It's a sod, it's a secret, right? You're supposed to be listening. Sod Hashem li'reav, right? If you really fear God, you're listening. Amar lo lech emor lahem al tachushu l'minyanchem. Don't be so concerned with your voting system. This is not a comment on current events. Kach mikublani Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. This is what I received from Yochanan ben Zakkai, who, if we remember, was the teacher of those Talmudim in the first Maseh. Sheshama mirabo v'rabo mirabo, that heard from his teacher and his teacher from his teacher. They were listening, right? Shama. Hilchata halacha Moshe Sinai. It's something that was passed down from Sinai, right? You got to be more in touch with tradition. This is something that runs deep. Amon Moav Masrin Maserani B'Shvit. It's a tradition that we've had since Sinai. Okay, there's a lot of difficulty here. This was a rabbinic enactment. How could it be halacha Moshe Sinai, right? If it has to do with, there's a lot of problems in that statement. We're gonna have to leave them for now. So they ask Mata'am. Why are Ammon, this is just the technical halachic reasoning, why should Ammon and Moab be able to give Maser Ani B'Shvi'it? Like what explains that they're not technically part of Israel such that they can be producing like crops and then giving tithes in the Shemitah year? Mipnei shekedusha rishona kitcha, sorry, Harbei Chachim kavshu olei Mitzrayim, in the first Aliyah to Israel, not in our most recent version. When they came from Mitzrayim, they conquered many cities. But the second time they came from Bavel, they didn't conquer them again. And that first kedusha, when they first conquered those lands, it was only a temporary kedusha of lo kisha la'atid lavo, wasn't forever, which didn't make them properly part of Israel, and therefore they were exempt. They did this intentionally. They left them so that aniyim, poor people in Shemitah, when they weren't able to get more crops or they weren't allowed to grow themselves, would have something to rely on, right? That's halachat Moshe Sinai. The people make the land kadosh. Tana la'achar shenit yashva da'ato. So now, after his mind was settled, Amari hiraton sheyachzeru einei Yosi limkoman, right? So he calmed down and he said, "Let my student Yosi have his eyes back in their sockets." V'chazru, and they returned, and that is where we're going to stop. So, right, he wasn't using his eyes properly. It's about learning to listen. The concept of chidush always in Torah. Thoughts, comments, questions? I know I kept you later. Thoughts, comments, questions, things that you saw here that you want to make connections to. There's so much more to be said. Anyone? Okay. I hope I wasn't shutting down conversation there, but all right. No. All right, people. Thank you so much for learning.
Thank
Come
you.
learn again. I
Thank
hope you
you.
enjoyed. This is a taste of what it is to learn Agadah. And there's so much more. Come talk to me in shul if you want to learn more. All right. Have a good night, everyone. I'm going to stop.
Thank you.
Bye. Night.